Nintendo's president Shuntaro Furukawa recently conducted an interview with Kyoto Shimbun, and although the interview itself is both Japanese and paywalled, Nintendo Patents Watch on Blue Sky has pulled some quotes. It's been out a few days, and I haven't rushed to cover it for a couple of reasons, but mainly, to be honest, it didn't feel all that momentous, although there were a couple of mild eyebrow raisers. Let's deal with those first, quickly glimpse of what else Shuntaro Furukawa had to say, and then let's look into what may be the more interesting question of why Nintendo's CEO has chosen now to give an interview that, and no shade to the mighty journalists of Kyoto Shimbun, who I'm sure always shoot for the scoop, is about as newsworthy as a tall glass of milk. First up, Furukawa's translated as saying, components are procured from suppliers based on Nintendo's medium to long-term business plan. The current memory price has no immediate impact on their financial performance. However, we must monitor the situation closely. End quote. Now, based on a long-term business plan doesn't quite confirm that they have deals at fixed prices, but it does suggest it, although this is broadly consistent with the feedback he was giving in the November presentation. Of course, eventually their contracts will expire and things will have to change, and Nintendo may want to make an anticipatory move ahead of time in terms of changing the price, but in many respects, they're better if they can keep the costs low, or at least at the current rates, for a good while, especially if the rest of the market is increasing their prices. I've covered the likelihood of cost increases this year before, and while I think it's plausible given the background factors that they do increase the price of Switch 2, I also think Nintendo may throw everything at protecting, at least, the lucrative US market for the duration of this particular calendar year. Of course, Furukawa says he doesn't comment on hypotheticals with regard to pricing. Now, the other thing that isn't new, it's a rehash of the previous financial briefing, if anything, but is worth bearing in mind is this, per Nintendo Patents Watch, who says, Furukawa thinks that it's important to build a strong financial foundation so that employees can take time to refine creations until they themselves are satisfied without being pressured by short-term business results. Now, I think this is often forgotten when considering Nintendo's game pipeline. The absence of an announcement for Animal Crossing, Mario, or what have you doesn't mean that these games aren't in development at all times, and one of the best things Nintendo has done over the years is to consistently back the creators to take the time they need. They're also better in recent years at revealing titles closer to their actual launch, especially after learning hard lessons with the very public trials and tribulations of Metroid Prime 4. Now, partly it is obviously spin that they want to make money to support their game creators to take their time to perfect their games, but it is also basically true. You can see in 2017 and 2018 Nintendo rushing to chuck stuff out of the door. Look at how Mario Tennis Aces and Kirby Star Allies were finished on the fly with post-launch free DLC over the year 2018. Now, some people are critical of the content offer in, let's say, Mario Kart World relative to the price, but in absolute terms, the game is clearly head and shoulders above the launch version of any prior Mario Kart, even if it lags behind what Mario Kart 8 became after nearly a decade on the market. I will say that I think the mood music here is towards longer waits for big games. I've already said that I don't expect to see the next Fujibashi Zelda for a long time, and I could see Animal Crossing taking a surprisingly long period of time to complete as well. I do think they will have contingencies for these franchises though, as we've seen with Splatoon Raiders holding the fort while we wait for Splatoon 4, and I suspect a fairly significant Mario offering in 2026, but I've got other videos covering this, both in the past and some coming up. Otherwise, Furukawa noted, Switch 2 supply has stabilized globally, except Japan needing a bit more time to meet demand. In other words, they can supply as much as the market needs right now. Now, the fact that demand isn't dropping off yet in Japan is good for the company, but if Nintendo has a consistent supply pace that they want to keep up, potentially to keep those contracts that they have made, which are offering them particular benefits right now as prices are soaring for RAM, well, they will want something that juices demand going forward in order to keep up that momentum. The thing is, though, we kind of know that the Mario movie is likely to fill that role of spiking demand mid-year. Now, Furukawa is also translated as saying, Nintendo aims to make Switch 2 accommodate first and third-party developers' ideas, which is the same as the kind of line that was pushed since the machine's original launch date in 2025, where they were talking about the innovation focus being on the ideas that the new tech enabled for software utilization rather than some kind of specific gimmick, as has been the case with prior consoles. Furukawa also notes, there are people who pick up their first console when reaching a certain age, and Nintendo wants to make Switch 2 accessible to them, which is obvious but non-committal. Clearly, they will start to push Switch 2 to younger audiences over time, and you could argue that the new Yoshi game is one obvious way of doing so. He also confirms that they're developing both popular series and new software, which, yep, again, pretty obvious. He hedges about anime streaming, saying that they're not at the point of anime streaming yet, and waves it away as something that might be good in the future. And it does seem a little bit like the newspaper trying desperately to get a scoop, and Furukawa not really biting. They also want to add more features to the Nintendo Museum, which I doubt will astonish anyone. I don't think as an interview this really adds to our some knowledge of what Nintendo is doing, and it really feels like Furukawa is fully in control of his messaging and his brief and is keeping things on a deliberately even keel. More interesting, frankly, is his decision to do an interview at all, as while it's not completely unusual, it's also not something he does enormously frequently, and I would guess that he felt some need after recent negative headlines and speculation, including the sharp decline of Nintendo's stock price, which I covered the other week, and which is continuing since. He felt like it would be as well to do a milquetoast, hold the line, reinforce the fundamentals of the business update. Note even the choice of the interviewer, the local paper of Kyoto, Nintendo's long-term home base. It reads to me as a very low-key, just local interest piece. Of course, if they were feeling a bit more gregarious, I'm not sure that the Kyoto press pool would always be in luck with regard to Nintendo's attention to the same degree. All the same, I think Nintendo will continue to play it cool over the months ahead. At the start of February, we will see the next set of financials, and I would expect the numbers to be on balance pretty good for the 9-month window, even if they are somewhat down for the holiday numbers in certain, especially Western territories. They then have the option to drop something massive in February to try to gain attention, but honestly, I think it might just look like panicking when they don't massively need to. By May's financials, they will be celebrating a financial year that, whatever the issues around the holiday season, was clearly already a monumental success for them in terms of launching a major system and guaranteeing their trajectory for the coming years. By August, they will likely be victory lapping from the Mario movie, and as I've said previously, I do expect major stuff at the end of the year, even if they don't reveal it until June. To me, what I'd be looking for, if Nintendo are particularly concerned at all at this point, would be a reveal of a major franchise entry without a date. The sort of thing they did with the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is now in development. Or if there are multiple significant 2027 reveals in the next few months. Yes, they revealed a bunch of 2026 stuff last March, but that was all Switch 1 content to signal that the core system would still be supported. It would be surprising to see the same kind of thing now for their major games, with the caveat that they do seem willing to allow an 18-month or so hype window for big titles like Splatoon, Animal Crossing, and others, and there may be particular reasons why they do wish to announce something a long time ahead of time. For example, if Masahiro Sakurai wants to avoid the endless questions of what he's working on next, perhaps it would be as well just to say, yes, he's working on a new Super Smash Bros. At any rate, that's it for now, but please do consider liking, commenting, and checking out the Patreon to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.